early years of the 60s, folks were still trying to do things like counter the prevailing attitudes of being, sick and sinful and criminal. So they would do a lot of work with the media. Starting in 1960, there were open national conferences in San Francisco, LA, New York, where the media was invited. And so activists made themselves available to the media for interviews to try to counter some of the stereotypes. So the first part of the 60s, I think, can be seen as sort of a moment when people are trying to break into visibility and to redefine who they were. Groups like the Daughters of Bilitis and Mattachine Society really thought that it was a matter of civil rights, that lesbians, gay men, bi people, trans folks, all deserved to see themselves and be treated as US citizens just like everyone else. And that the fact of their sexuality both set them apart but shouldn't deny them of their rights.
So these ideas about some people don't have equal access to resources that other people just take for granted, right? These things begin to shift as well, right? So that when people realize, oh, gay and lesbian people are being denied access to these resources in a way that's not the same as, by any stretch of the imagination, African American people or Chicanos and Latinos, right? But that there's a denial of access to certain resources, people begin to sort of shift. Maybe I don't like gay people, but they should be able to, stay in a hotel if they want to, or they shouldn't be fired from a job. So these ideas about what is justice, change as well. So there's, in the 60s, a cultural shift, and there's a shift in the way people conceptualize what kind of society we want to live in and what's fair, what's democratic.
If you don't organize, and if you don't somehow belong to a group that can try to fight back, you can be denied your rights.
A lot of gay activists who became really outspoken in the 60s had participated in the African American civil rights movement, sort of not as out gay people, but as, just like concerned citizens, right? As politically motivated individuals, and learned a lot, and brought those strategies back.
The climate of fighting for rights through the civil rights movement, through the experiences of wartime, I think provided almost like a compunction for people to not be dismissed and to not be denied.
You hear a lot of, we have rights too. You get this sort of rhetoric of, we understand that we're living in this, sort of the context of a larger civil rights movement, and there's transformations in American culture, and we have rights too. We should have, a resistant movement, or we should fight for our rights too. And it seems so kind of crazy and radical, homosexuals aren't a kind of people, homosexuals are just, people who make bad choices. And so this evolving idea of gay and lesbian people or homosexuals as a kind of people that were prosecuted for being understood as a kind of people and could fight back as a kind of people, right? And that had group interests. I think that was really the most important influence of the civil rights movement, that you could fight for changes in society with a larger voice than the individual voice. So it's larger than I have the right to my own privacy, to love whoever I want to. It's about being able to take up space, being able to meet in restaurants or go out to bars or walk down the street.
The big difference is visibility between the early 60s and the late 60s for the LGBTQ movement. By the mid 60s, activists on the East Coast said, we're going to march. We're going to protest. This is ridiculous. Things aren't getting better. And so they started the July 4th Independence Hall protests, which are fascinating to look at today. Everybody looks like they're going to church or to an interview for a job. They're all wearing dresses for the women, none of the men could. They're wearing suits and ties for the men, none of the women could. But they are dressed appropriately. So the desire to be accepted, the desire for respectability, to counter the stereotypes of sick, sinful, criminal, they're putting it out there on the street.
So Juan took me over to Society for Individual Rights, SIR, which had just began. And basically it seemed at that time that they were talking about social events where they could get together where it would be safe. They wouldn't be arrested and so forth. And they asked if there were any questions. So I stood up and I asked them, I said, shouldn't we follow the example of Dr. King and to demonstrate for equal rights? And the one person who was the moderator was telling me, no, and he didn't know what to say, so the person above him took over the conversation and said, well, we are increasing in numbers in San Francisco. Many of us are stockbrokers, we work in department stores, we're hairdressers, we're blue collar, etc. Our numbers are increasing, so don't make waves. If you make waves, this will cause a problem. I left SIR knowing that I could picket on the street with a sign of my own. I demand rights, but I knew that everyone could just walk by me and ignore me. Because one person, you can ignore one person. We needed more people. In April and May, Vanguard demonstrated. We would go to businesses that did not want LGBT people in them, and we would have pickets and would walk around saying, gays demand rights, hustlers demand rights, lesbians demand rights, etc. But the kids were really wonderful because they realized that as they were able to picket and demonstrate and that they weren't being beaten up, which they had been afraid of because that often happened to them when they were individuals, that there was some unity and power when they were acting together. They realized that they were a vanguard, they were a force to try and affect change. One morning, Joel Williams and I were sitting in Doggy Diner, and in comes Dixie Russo. And Dixie ordered coffee and something to eat. And the person behind the counter refused to serve Dixie. He told Dixie that you have to go home and wash your face and change your clothes and then we'll serve you. And Dixie said, what? And took the sugar shaker and threw it down and broke it. So the guy behind the counter calls the gendarmes, and we were surrounded by 17 people in riot gear. There was a paddy wagon, and there was another paddy wagon that was there briefly, so I think only one stayed. And we were in a standoff for 5.5 hours, sitting inside of the Doggy Diner. It was Dixie, myself, Joel, and I think about 4 or 5 other people from Vanguard. We're all sitting there. The police withdrew after 5.5 hours, and it's quite possible that Elliot Blackstone, Chief Elliot Blackstone, who worked with the police commission, might have told them to withdraw because he worked with Glide. So unknowns to us, that might have been what happened. So that night at Compton's cafeteria, one of the street queens was insulted by the cashier, and she hit him on the head with a tray. And one of the Pinkerton guards came up to grab someone else, and I think they threw coffee in his face. And then it just, pandemonium broke loose from that moment on. The interesting thing was it wasn't mentioned in the paper the next day. I mean, we saw the burned out remnants, but it didn't make the news because they didn't want that kind of thing known.
In every single movement, you've got to have the foundation for when something jumps off and people can capitalize on it. And that was certainly true in terms of the almost 20 years of organizing that preceded Stonewall. Stonewall feels to me like one of those iconic moments that defines a movement that all of a sudden reaches into the mainstream, and it does it through the media. The fact that Stonewall was in New York City, the center of the national and international media at that time, is huge.
It was a hot night. They just ticked off the wrong crowd, and the crowd said no. That's a word that the police were never used to hearing in a gay bar. Everybody was afraid of them. Everybody did anything they said like sheep. Not these sheep.
There was a ferment brewing of, we're not going to take this anymore.
Stonewall surprised everybody. I don't think anybody expected it. I don't think they were ready for Stonewall. They should have been, because sooner or later the police were going to just irritate people to the point where they wouldn't care anymore. That's basically what happened. But the riot was the police, not them. All they wanted to do was stay there. They didn't start fighting. The police started the riot, and that's why Stonewall doesn't like it being called a riot. They like it being called a rebellion.
Stonewall was whitewashed, that there's a way in which the trannies and the drag queens and the street hustlers and the young folks who were right up in it sort of got pushed to the side a little bit and don't really get talked about. Sylvia Rivera is one of those activists who was legendary and fierce and tired of being pushed around by the police. She was good friends with a black woman named Marsha Johnson, another woman who's rarely mentioned when Stonewall is talked about.
Marsha was one of the 4 members of STAR, Street Transvestite Action Revolutionary, which was Sylvia Rivera, Marsha Johnson, BB, I don't know her last name, and one other. And the 4 of them together were running this actual civil rights group for transgendered and transsexual drag queens. The drag queens were an embarrassment to GAA. There were a lot of middle-class gays. They didn't like them, and they owe the entire debt of gratitude to the drag queens. I mean, these are the people who did it.
The impetus, the passion unleashed for some people by Stonewall comes at the end of June. And that year, it's 1969, is the usual July 4th Independence Hall protest. And some folks said, well, you know, instead of putting all our energy into walking around with signs at Independence Hall again this year, maybe we should think about doing something else. So they still had the protest in '69 at Independence Hall, but it started a conversation about how to continue to have a very visible commemoration of gay power, which is now also starting to be used. The term "gay is good" had been started by activist Frank Kameny out of the Madison Society, totally taking from the Black Power movement. So both gay power, Black is beautiful, gay is good, coming from that place.
A lot of the people from Stonewall, after Stonewall, they had joined GAA. Some of them had originally been in the Gay Liberation Front, which had a totally different attitude than GAA. GAA was this real white bread, we're going to do this the democratic way, and you know what the Gay Liberation Front said. They said, the hell with that, we're going to do it. Jihad.
It's younger folks, much more radical, much more militant, and with a lot less to lose. They're either in college or they're kicking around doing different jobs. They don't have professions. They're sort of not worried about being penalized for their activism.
If you think about kind of the context of the civil rights movement, it spans a couple of decades, right? And attitudes change around, what are sort of the best techniques and strategies for political mobilization, sort of changes over time from like nonviolence to like kind of a direct and aggressive response to policing and discrimination of many kinds. And you find that similar trajectory in the gay and lesbian movement.
One of the things that is written out of the history of the LGBTQ movement often is feminism. And it is important to understand that just like the civil rights movement, just like other student movements, anti-war movements, feminism is undergoing a resurgence in the 60s. And it influences both the way that people thought about themselves, women and men, but also about the way that they thought about the roles that society constructs for people based on sex and gender. So some of the impetus, for example, for new social roles, new ways to parent, new ways to look for jobs, new ways to construct our lives so that it's not in such a rigid male-female box. If you're a man, you must do this. If you're a woman, you must do that. Part of that is feeding the militance, the radicalism of the gay movement in the late 60s. Feminism is underscoring men's liberation. It's underscoring sort of the push toward androgyny and sort of blending what we wear, how we look, more of a freedom to choose. So I think that often when we think about gay rights, gay power, we don't think about women and we don't think about the feminist movement and the incredible connections between the two.
This imperative to come out of a closet, became sort of like it felt strict, like if you didn't come out of the closet, then you were somehow ashamed and you were also irresponsible, to your community.
The best thing that gay people can do is be visible and be out, because sooner or later, everybody's going to know somebody gay, and it's going to completely change how people think about LGBTQ people.
Have the pride inside of you to say, yes, I'm gay and I'm proud.
So there's where the concept of pride comes in. So we're going to be out and visible, and that's what our parade, not a march anymore, is going to be about. We're going to show you we're sort of back to the old, we're not sick, sinful, or criminal. We're folks, we may like to dress funny sometimes, we may like to take our clothes off in public, but we're just like you.
They used to take me to jail and take all my clothing out, start naked. And I would just walk around proud as hell. Inside it was killing me. I'm not gonna let them humiliate me. Sure, see me humiliated like that. I just walk around, like nothing. Like I had my clothes on. And that's where I learned, have pride in myself. Nobody taught me all this. You learn it the hard way.
After the Gay Pride Parade here in Los Angeles, I had said and sent letters to people in the city council, anybody I could think of, and said, I'm going to be fasting and praying after our first parade. I'm not going to eat until somebody from city government comes and talks to me. I laid there and fasted for 16 days, only drinking water. Other people fast other ways, but my Pentecostal background taught me you're only supposed to drink water. And I drank water for 16 days, and a member of the city council showed up. And I was there and using the bathroom at a gas station. They wouldn't let me use the restroom in the courthouse. And I had to go, or it was closed, I'm sorry. Let me take that back. It was closed because it was Sunday, and I had to go down to a filling station, and I made people walk down there with me to make sure I didn't eat. I wanted witnesses that I was not going somewhere and having a sandwich. Came back up, and while I was gone, a city council member, Bob Stevenson, and his wife, Peggy, had showed up, and I was not there, and they left a letter for me and said, Reverend Perry, we want to meet with you. Please, break mortars are soon forgotten. Says, please come and meet with us. And you know what? I stopped my fast that day, 16 days later, had Mexican food. I had a taco. People laugh at me at this day, but I was hungry for some Mexican food. I said, we need some Mexican food. And I broke my fast, and I met with them, and as they say, the rest is history.